You were doing ear pricks mid-workout and VO2 maxes.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have infinite amount of time for training. So I want to get as much as I can out of the minutes that I spend in the gym.
When they hear, going heavy or sprinting, I feel like people have this in their mind that means, for example, running on the track full speed or doing like a super heavy deadlift.
You can get like such a big stimulus out of an air bike.
How do you stay driven to compete in a sport for as long as you have?
Because I can stop if I want to, but I have the option to continue and I can do it for one more year. And then you can maybe do it for one more year. And then here we are 15 years later. And you know what? I think I could do this for one more year if I wanted to.
When we talk about cold, like in California, if it's like 50 degrees, we're cold. And Texas, and we're in Texas, we're saying like 40 degrees. And it's like, oh man, it's cold. But you're saying, when you say -10, are you talking like
Celsius? I go Celsius. So I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit.
It's still cold.
Very cold. Yeah. It's like in the 20s, in the 20s and the teens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Like you just said that your children sleep in the stroller, and that like how cold does it actually get where you're at, and what impact do you think that has on like the people of Iceland? I feel like that must just make you guys just tough.
To like sleep outside as infants?
Just like in general, just like temperature, like you guys get exposed to these like kind of more extremes where like us, kind of people out here in California, we don't get that same thing.
True. I am going to say though, like in Canada, I've heard like -20, -30, whatever, like Celsius, like that sounds absolutely insane to me. We don't get that. I would say we're like fairly tempered because we're on an island. It never gets very warm. It never gets very cold. So on a warm day, it's like maybe 15 degrees Celsius in the summertime, which is like cold in you guys' books. And then when it gets really cold, it goes below freezing. It is snow outside right now. So it is like, it gets cold, but it feels like cold to the bone because it's so windy that you're like, it just like hits you. It's so cold.
I think something about that, I know that we're not in that. I do think something about that just makes people tougher. I wanted to bring up this idea. When I first met you, this is like so long ago in 2009
Yes.
at the CrossFit Games when you got your first muscle up. I'll never forget that moment. And when I first heard about your last name, Daughter, I found it to be really intriguing because I met a bunch of daughters later on. I thought to myself, like, what is about that? So I started researching it and I started to look at the lineage of it. But I think you, along with Katrin and others, have like single-handedly, at least for me in the CrossFit space, redefined what daughter means to me as an American, right? From something that just is a lineage and a pass down as a daughter to a symbol of strength. Like I really believe that when I hear the word daughter now, and I know that you have a brand that you've built through that, like that word means strength when I think about it, because all the women that I know that are daughters are badasses. So I want to kind of start there because I think that you've done a phenomenal job representing your culture and women in general from all the years I've known you.
Well, thank you. It's definitely, I do think that a lot of women are very strong in Iceland. Most women, actually. I think we're far ahead when it comes to women's rights. We're far ahead when it comes to being independent. And I think this is a rough country. Like I would not have wanted to be living here when we like settled in 879, I think was the year when Iceland was settled. And like, can you imagine living here at that time? Like you were just building and living in turf houses. And it's not like that long ago that stopped. Like now we have fantastic houses and we know how to use the hot water and we live in comfort, but it's still a rough country, right? So I think for women, like when you read like old Icelandic books, which I love, like Icelandic sagas, they're great. They're like really brutal books, but they're really good stories as well. And there you always have like the heroes, like the hero of the book is usually a man, but there is always a strong woman. There's always a strong figure, like female figure that's in there. And it was men wanted to marry strong women because what strong like women were doing, they weren't just inside. Like they were taking care of multiple things and they had to work as well. Like everyone had to contribute. So I think I come from strong women, and it's built in us that we want to be strong ourselves, and we want to be able to do things ourselves. I feel like Icelandic women are very much like that. I don't want to say that they're not like that in other cultures. However, I noticed this pattern very early on. So I started competing, like you said, 2009. And the most common question I was getting in the beginning was, what is it like being a girl with so much muscles? And what
Oh,
do men think about you, or boys at home, or men in Iceland think about you having so much muscle? And I'm like, where's that coming from? Like, I don't know. I've never thought about what men think about me having so much muscle. And what is it like being a woman with that much muscle? And being strong is fucking amazing. Like, I can do so many things, and I like competing against men. And like, I think you get then drawn to also maybe like in my friend group and the people I was around were strong men as well, and they don't get intimidated by someone that is strong. But I'm 19 years old, and those were the questions I was getting. And it wasn't until I started traveling so much with CrossFit in 2011, especially 2012, where I noticed these cultural differences where it was maybe a taboo. I remember going to South Korea, and even the owner of the CrossFit box we went to, the owner, he had his wife, and his wife was sitting next to me at a dinner. I will never forget this. We were having dinner together, and she was like, I wish I could train as much as you do. I think it's so amazing. You look so good. And I'm like, what do you mean? You can't train? She's like, my husband only allows me to lift weights once a week, and I only get to train in the gym 3 times a week. I'm like, and he owns a CrossFit box. Like, what? So this is what like showed me how different it can be from what places you're from. And it made me appreciate that much more where I do come from. And I do think daughter at this point, it is something that I've wanted to build up as a symbol of strength, because I want to spread the word, and I want women to embrace their own strength.
You know, I love that, Annie. And one thing that I've been not surprised with, it doesn't surprise me anymore. And if anything, it's been really cool. So since we started this Train Hard brand and the newsletter we send out and the podcast, we've intentionally like very much catered our messaging to men. And it's very much about like men being capable and protectors and providers. And the one thing that I started noticing was actually how many women it was resonating with, like how many women were like, I love these workouts. And I think that at least here in the US, I do think that there's kind of this like missing, and there's a lot of these women, I feel like in CrossFit, and I'm curious your take, where fitness for women is kind of like a softer version that I know a lot of women aren't looking for. Like they want to train like the boys do. They want to be capable. They want to be strong. And I think that that's the cool thing that I've heard from people, from women specifically, that are using our programming and listening to the podcast and all that, even though we cater the message very much towards men and very like, masculine topics and so on and so forth, at least how we define that here in the States, it seems to be resonating with a lot of women. So I guess my question is, do you think that that's unique to the CrossFit space that we kind of all play in? Do you think that that's something where, culturally you have seen it start to change here in the US and get closer to what it is there? As you were talking, the other thing I was thinking about too is it's been fascinating to see like the rise of, I hope I don't pronounce her name wrong, Ilona Mayer. And do you know who that is? The rugby player that's now in like Dancing with the Stars, and she's gotten like super popular here in the US.
Yes.
And that to me is like another perfect example now of someone that embodies like what being very feminine in many ways. And she's like incredibly beautiful, and she's doing this dancing thing, but also like an incredibly badass rugby player that like absolutely dominates what is an incredibly, incredibly demanding masculine sport. So have you seen that shift in any way here in the States or in other cultures?
I would definitely say that it's been shifting from when I just started CrossFit. Obviously, it's been over 15 years, so thankfully. but I think it has started changing a lot in the US. I think CrossFit has helped significantly when it comes to that. Women kind of just embracing it and wanting to be stronger, but also just us getting used to seeing women, that it's not, I feel like the message has gone a lot from that, just like being as skinny as possible to just being as healthy as possible. I want that to be the message that we're trying to spread. And we're trying to show just so many different bodies and variety, that there's not just one thing that fits all. And I think women have started embracing it. And I think men have started embracing that as well and are not as intimidated by it, I believe. But I think the more that we see it, the easier it's going to be. And we're starting to see it more. There's a lot of bad things with social media, but there's also a lot of good things with social media. But by people seeing it a little bit more, I think they get more used to it and they see what it can do for them. I do still think that it is like, for example, I don't think a lot of women necessarily want to look the way I look. And that's fine. I don't think we should try to look like someone else anyways. But I think they get nervous that they might, if they lift too many weights or too much
Yeah.
weight, they will look like me. I'm like, it has taken me not just 15 years of competing in CrossFit. It took me 15 years before that to build to what I am right now. So the fear of you all of a sudden waking up, looking in the mirror, and you're gonna be super bulky, that's impossible.
And
You're
just
gonna
for the
have to work
record,
so hard for it.
I don't think you're super bulky by any means. I just want to clarify that. But
Oh, well, thank you.
in my opinion, you have a phenomenal just strength body. Like, I mean, I think that you, Tia, and others, like, you do represent like a lean, athletic build, right? And I think it's came from. I agree with you that like you're not just
Gymnastics.
overnight gonna, just get. But I do still think that's a stigma for women. I do think that they have just been ingrained. I think it's getting better because I would say CrossFit had played a big role in that. But I do think
Yes.
that women subconsciously think that if they touch a weight, they're going to get big and bulky. And I just think that that's, man, it's really unfortunate because it's not going to happen the way they think. If anything, it's just going to build phenomenal strength. They're going to have better bone density and all the things. We all know that. I just wanted to clarify. I think that you guys look very athletic, and I think it's great.
Thank you. Yeah. No, like I am happy the way that I am, but I do think that there are just women that get afraid of that. But like you said, it's going to take decades of hard work to get to that state. What's going to happen first is you're going to start leaning out and you're going to feel stronger and you're going to feel better. And that's what I also think is so incredible with what's happening with like now later on. We're starting to see with women going to peri and post menopause, it's like the most important thing for them to do is weight training. And it's increasing the awareness of it more and more. So now all of a sudden I'm working with like anywhere from 40-year-old to an 80-year-old on building a strength program. And that's where I'm like, if we can see those women as role models lifting weights, hopefully the young girls can also be like, you know what? That is like fucking badass. Like this is what I want to be able to do when I am older and what I'm going to need to do if I don't want to lose my muscles and become weak and not being able to live a healthy long life.
I saw that you put out programming specific for like the women and menopause and whatnot. I have a question on that. What role do you think the workouts play on the mindset side of going through that transition? So I could see why building muscle, maintaining capability is critical. Obviously, I think many people would agree with that. But as women age, I don't claim to know much about menopause, but I've heard a lot about it. What role are you seeing with the people that you're working with? And I believe you even have a doctor that you work with who on the mindset changes and how fitness is contributing to improving that transition.
Well, there's just so many things that training can improve, right? Anywhere from physical to mental aspects of it. And I think there's so like menopause is so complex. It can be so different for women, but a lot of them have same symptoms that they're feeling. And honestly, like it seems maybe super weird that I dove into this, but it came all from my mom and her going through menopause and me seeing that the training I was giving her was not benefiting her the same way as for my dad. Like my dad, during COVID, my dad got a 6-pack. Like with the training program I gave him, he got a 6-pack. And my mom, she was stricter on her training and on her diet than my dad was. And it took, like 8 months and he had a 6-pack and in like a better shape than he's been in for years. And my mom lost a little bit of weight, but not a lot. I'm like, I don't understand. She was way stricter. So that's why I dove into menopause. And I could see just, I have been having her do so many wrong things. Like I had her do so much threshold training and so too, and just fat burning and bodybuilding. And just like, it was so much about just like burning calories. And I realized when I studied menopause and like with Dr. Stacey Sims that they have to be doing high intensity training and sprint intervals and lifting heavy weights. Like they need to be doing anywhere from like 3 reps to 6 reps, not a lot more than that. And like having good rest in between to get the right stimulus. And that's gonna get the response, because when the estrogen drops, like they need a different response in their body from their cells. And I'm not gonna go into anything technical, but like it's so interesting and it's so mind-blowing the different, like the things that are happening in our bodies. So I did this for my mom. I made a program for her. And in 1 year, there were insane changes. So all of a sudden, I had so many others at the gym that were asking for it. And that's how it kind of evolved into, okay, like we need information. We need assistance for women that are going through this. And there are more and more research that's backing it up, and more science that we're always getting. So that's how this started. But we're also seeing like with the changes, like with the hormonal changes, there's less energy that women have. The stress hormone goes up and you have less sleep, and that increases cortisol, and that increases you reaching for fast carbs. And it's all things that happens in our bodies as well, but it's happening all of a sudden. The things that you used to do are not working anymore. And that can affect you so much, like mentally, and mentally can affect you then physically. So it's like this chain reaction wormhole that you can go down into, where honestly, training can fix so many of these things. And that's incredible. Like, I think that is actually incredible that us training can do so much for us.
Man, it's so interesting because everything that you mentioned as the ideal things is like the complete opposite of what, your average women, or even man for that matter, once they get a certain age, start to gravitate towards, right?
Yes.
It's less
so
intensity.
odd, right?
It's lower weights. It's the complete opposite of everything you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Exactly.
I mean, if you ask me, hey, should a 70-year-old woman be hitting 3 to 5 rep maxes or heavy loads and sprinting? I'd be like, I don't know. Like that sounds like a lot. And then obviously you got to build them up, but it makes total sense. Like when you actually one of the things that we do is I host like a free men's club workouts in a parking lot. And when I do it every week, I generally add in sprinting every week, very little, because I find that a lot of the guys, they're missing out on that they miss. Oh, there we go. They're missing out on, hello. Hi, what's up, dude?
We have a co-guest on the podcast.
Oh, yes. Just for a second.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Jason. Yes. A lot of the men are missing.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, a lot of people, like, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And so we start sprinting on a weekly basis, because I'm just convinced that, like, at some point, everybody just loses capacity, whether it's, to get down on the ground and get back up again or whatever it is. But if we keep up with it, like, if you're working with a woman who's 80 years old who could sprint, the likelihood of her not being able to get off the ground is pretty much impossible to me. Or if she could do a burpee, she can get up off the ground. And I think those are really foundational skills we need to continue to preach and put forward.
Exactly. And it's those shockers that you want to be able to give your body, but obviously it's something that you need to train up. So it is like, we're obviously taking like baby steps with the ones like anywhere from teaching them how to unrack a barbell to knowing also, like when you say like sprinting, if you haven't been doing that for a long time, it's really hard to say like go all out for 15 seconds and see what will happen. It's like they're all out. It's not going to be all out, right? It's going to be more like 70% and they're going to, whew, that was really hard, you know? And it's like, no. Like I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel like a little bit of a tingle maybe in your fingers and like a little bit of a whew, like get the adrenaline from it. Like building that up takes time if you haven't done it for a long time.
And Annie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that another piece that I think you're doing a good job and we can kind of demystify for people is when they hear, going heavy or sprinting, I feel like people have this in their mind that means, for example, running on the track full speed or doing like a super heavy deadlift. All this stuff is relative. And specifically with the sprinting, I know that, you can do it on a rower, you can do it on a bike, you can do it on things that are going to be just, you can get that stimulus, but you don't have to do it running on a track, which, you could argue is maybe a little bit
Takes
more
way more out of you.
intense.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little harder on the joints. You can do it with these other things. So people need to realize that as well.
Exactly. I would say like if I would choose one machine for a person like an elderly or even just for me, if I would choose just one machine for me to have, I would like it to be like a C2 bike because that's something where I can stay on for a very long time and it feels kind of like comfortable. But I would definitely choose like an air bike because you're going to get the most out of an air bike. You can get like such a big stimulus out of an air bike for shorter and longer distances. So
yeah, we
and
get the
way
question
better on
sometimes.
your body than running.
Oh yeah, we get the question oftentimes like, hey, in my garage gym, I'm looking to add another piece of cardio equipment. What do you recommend? And Gabe and I, we've talked about this quite a bit. I love the C2 bike. Maybe I'm curious your feedback on this before we dive into other subjects. But with the C2 bike, I generally feel like it's like a muscle stamina thing where like I feel it kind of throbbing in my legs, but I don't necessarily get like an aerobic, like kind of like chest issues. Like it's more like, oh my gosh, my legs, the stamina is going away. Whereas on an air bike, I feel a lot like in my like aerobic system and full body. And so would you say that, I mean, cause I generally ride the C2 bike every morning. It's just something I could just get on and just kind of cruise where you can't really cruise on an air bike. Like it's like, that's intervals, but it's highly effective. So do you kind of see it the same way? And like over the last, I mean, shit, you've been almost competing in CrossFit since 2009. I mean, you've competed in the CrossFit Games like what?
15 years.
15 times. Yeah. So, I mean, how does that play into the role in your training? Do you think about it like that at all? Like muscle stamina versus like aerobic conditioning? And do you kind of agree with that on the different bikes?
Yes. Yes and no. I would always do sprint intervals on the bike, on the air bike. But I can get my heart rate fairly high on the C2 bike as well. And I like doing like a little bit fast, but it is more muscle fatigue that you get into. But like it just takes you longer to get your heart rate up. You need to be on it for longer to get the same or similar stimulus. But then you need to also be very smart with the damper, what you're using. If you're on a lower damper, it's going to be, you're going to get more blood flow and get more into the lungs as well. But definitely like, let's say that I'm warming up for a workout. I would maybe start on the C2 bike for 5 minutes and then I would go over to the air bike to actually get my heart rate high without just killing my legs. So for sure, like there is that difference on those bikes, which is why I would always recommend taking an air bike rather than a C2 bike, unless what you want to be doing is just like zone 2 work, which most women don't need to. But for a guy, it might be a good choice as well.
I'm curious, how is your, with Yami, with your entire team over the last 15 years, like, how is your training? I don't want to, I really want to talk about a bunch of other stuff, but training, but I still think that you are just such an incredible advocate for longevity in a sport that is difficult, that requires so many different skill sets. And to go and have 2 children in the process is just so mind-boggling to me. I'm really curious, since 2009, when you first got introduced to CrossFit, or a little bit before that, obviously, you started competing in 2009. How do you think you've seen like the athletic journey evolve? And like, What did you think was important back then that isn't as important today? I'm curious.
Wow. In the beginning, I just thought doing CrossFit was important. Just like CrossFit workout every day, preferably twice a day. I would do a workout, and then if I wasn't happy with my time, I would do the same workout again and try to beat my time and just like crush it in the gym. Like no matter what it was, I would want to just go all out all the time. Obviously, with the years, it's evolved. And thankfully, because I think my longevity in the sport would not have been this many years, I probably would have been done 2014, maybe 15, like had 5, 6, 7 years at tops with something like that. But learning, obviously, with age, you also need to learn different, that like you just can't get away with everything. You can't get away with training as stupid as you did before. So we've done a lot of like, we were probably the first ones, well, I was probably one of the first ones to have a proper coach just for me. One of the first ones to start working so much with the heart rate monitor and thinking about the different energy zones that I'm working on, thinking about how I can improve my recovery between, thinking about what stress it was having on my body when I had my back injury. That was a big learning point for me. And that was 2013. And then I had a knee injury in 2014. And then it's like, okay, like we need to figure out other ways out to train. So I increase CrossFit when I get closer to season, like CrossFit workouts, but I do a lot of maybe EMOM work and a lot of single modality, like insane amount of biking and specific pieces like gymnastics conditioning and like breaking it into, I know in the beginning it was like you're not supposed to specialize in anything, and now it's almost like try to specialize in everything, right? So getting assistance from endurance coach and reading endurance papers. What are the Norwegians doing that are so good at skiing? How do they develop that aerobic capacity? Like tapping into the different sports where you can get the most benefit from your training with doing like the testing, the VO2 max test this and seeing where my thresholds are in the different on the different machines, and then trying to implement that into CrossFit where I'm measuring like the lactate when I'm doing a workout where I'm supposed to be at threshold. We're also doing stopping in between, like in my 1 minute break, we're testing testing
So
the
you
lactate
were
in my
actually doing
blood.
lactate. You were doing ear pricks mid workout
Yeah.
and VO2 maxes.
Yes, absolutely. Just like seeing what is happening in the body so that we can get like, especially after I hit Freya, like I don't have infinite amount of time for training. So I want to get as much as I can out of the minutes that I spend in the gym. And then I want to maximize my recovery. So what is it that I need to eat to fuel correctly? How much like of carbs and protein? And now I've found out like women need to be taking 30 grams plus of protein after they reach 30 years old, preferably a little bit sooner. Women over 40 need to be taking 40 plus immediately after training. Like just being on top of everything as much as I can to get the most out of everything that I do. I'm maximizing my time so that I can be with my family and play with my kids as soon as I can.
Kids are like the ultimate efficiency hack. As soon
Right?
as
I'm
soon
like,
as you
what
have
was I
kids,
doing before?
all of a sudden you're like, I could do that 3-hour training session in an hour because I have to.
Yes.
I've seen Frederick pop in the background. So I wanted to ask you, there's been seasons in your life, Annie, where you've, done it all, at least as an outsider looking in, right? Like mom, qualify for the CrossFit Games, like entrepreneur, like you're balancing so much.
Yeah.
What role does your partner have in balancing all that and making it work? And then specifically, because like I said, we don't have many women guests on the podcast. Like, what's your advice for men to support like a very driven woman that's doing a lot?
Well, wow. He is such a big part of it. Like we've been in it together since 2010. So we've grown in the sport together, and he was obviously competing in CrossFit as well for years and was at the games, 4 or 5 times, competing as well. But even there, we learned to find a balance. where we were supporting each other. So we've learned to support each other throughout those years of competing. And then we made a decision together to continue my career in CrossFit. And he had to take a little bit of a backseat with his career in CrossFit. Like, it was just impossible for both of us to be competing. In the later years, especially.
Was that specifically a tough decision?
Not a super tough decision. No. Obviously, I would never ask that of him. He offered that because I was just saying it's really hard. Like, it was just really hard to balance everything. And he was just like, I don't have the need or the drive to compete at the highest level anymore. He only enjoys competing when I'm competing. So he was then just willing to take on more. He's always also been kind of my hands-on coach at the same time as well. So he took more that role on, helping me and BK. He's been doing that for years. And then he has always been so good when it comes to nutrition. So he does most of the things in the kitchen. Like, I try to assist, but I'm also like, when I get hungry, I get like hangry. So it's like, nope, just throw something together. I don't care what it is. Just something. It's like, step out of the kitchen. Just let me finish this. And then we have a great meal together. Like, he's even been there. So it's been, I would say, like, yes, it's been me competing, but it's been us competing every single year. Ever since, I would like to say, like, ever since 2017, it's been almost like a family decision. Am I competing again this year? It's a conscious conversation that we have together. Obviously, make sure that Yami is ready for another year. And then me, Frederick, and my parents, so usually me and Frederick first. And then we sit down with my parents and we talk it through together. It's like, are you ready to assist and be with me through these steps? Again, especially when we have Freya, like, that's not, me and Frederick would not have been able to just do that together. We needed my parents to be willing to step in and assist a little bit again, because they had to have, it was during COVID. We weren't allowed to travel with Freya. They had to stay with Freya and have her while I went to compete. So it's not like it is, I have the most amazing, I feel like throughout the years, I've just built this strong core group of people that if they weren't there with me, this would be impossible. Like, I would not be competing if it wasn't for Frederick. I would not have been able to come back if it wasn't for his assistance as well. And he's then been taking care of, Frederick is leaving, and I got I'm baby duty. He's picking up our daughter. Sorry.
Oh man.
But yeah, so I would not have been able to continue if it wouldn't have been for teamwork. And I also wouldn't have been able to continue after having Freya. So I had her 4 years ago now. So competing 2021, if he wouldn't have been willing to take on doing more of the house chores and letting me be with Freya, because I was only willing to train while she was sleeping. And then I just wanted to be with her. Like, I wanted to get playtime and like more quality family time and not sacrifice too many things. And he then took on other roles. We were building a house at the same time. And it's just, dude, it's been so many things that we've been doing at the same time. And when we had him, we were starting 2 companies, and it was just like, it's a lot.
Yeah,
and it's impossible. If that's why it's a long answer to that question. How big a role has Frederick been in all of this? He has been just the biggest role in it alongside me. Like, we wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't together.
Well, I think my takeaway from that is, like, for any guy listening, like, that should be the inspiration. Like, that should be the goal. The goal should be to have your wife say, or your significant other, whatnot, say, hey, this person, like, they're championing for me. They're aligned on my shared vision of goals. And I think, like, having that support system is key. You know, Ash and I every year would sit down and we would have a conversation if we were ready as a team to take on the next year's CrossFit Games. We would always do that. We would set up a time, because it is such a big decision. Because once you make the decision,
it's not just your time.
No,
It's the whole family.
it's the whole family. And I think you bring up a really interesting point. Like, so again, for me, it was just like Ash and I, because that was just the way it worked. But for you, involving your parents, involving all like, and Yami, your coach, involving all the quote unquote, like decision makers, all the people involved in like that all the people that were going to be impacted, involving them, right? And having that, like, it's almost like a business, right? You're making a decision to go do this. And now because you're all aligned on it, boom, you just off to the races. That's good
Then
feedback.
you have a team also. Then you have a shared goal, and it's the same. Like my physio was always involved in it as well. Ever since 2013, I've worked with the same person. Like I'm not changing my team because I have the perfect team. Like I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for the whole team. And I would always involve him as well because he's in London, Andrew. And that would mean that we would need to plan monthly trips for him to come to Iceland. So I wouldn't have to travel. He would come here and help me maintain my body in a good shape to be able to compete. Like it is a team.
Is there, I remember another really accomplished entrepreneur, female athlete we had on the podcast. We had a great conversation with Miranda. And one thing that she brought up that, she was very honest about was kind of like the tension and almost guilt when becoming a mom of like anything that pulls you away from that. Has that been something that's been, what's been your experience with that? Because I do know that, we have 2 kids relatively young and I've talked to this with my wife a lot. There's this like, there's a difference in the need that the kids have, especially early on between mom and dad. Like, that's just very straightforward. So how have you navigated that?
It was navigated in a way that I got to always have good time to do my work and train while baby slept. But it also meant that it was a difficult process in the beginning to make sure that the sleeping rhythm was as ideal as possible. So I had 4 to 5 hours to actually get my work done. Then I was off and I could be with my babies. And then in the evening at like 8, 9 p.m., that's where my second shift started of taking care of my body, stretching and getting ready for next day of work. So yeah, it was especially hard if they were sick or had a rough night because I always wanted to take those. I don't know why. It was just like as soon as they start crying, I think it's something like in maybe just when as soon as they start crying, then they need. It's like I trust Frederick 1000% to take care of it, but yet I'm like, give her to me, give him to me, give him to me. Like it's like the need to just take care of those nights. So that was what made it a little bit harder. And I decided it was just like, you know what? That's where I just need to sacrifice. Then that will just have to come down on my training and my fitness because I need to be here for them for those moments.
I was at the CrossFit Games. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, please. Was it 2022 or 1 where you got back on a podium position? You hit like some type of snatch or something.
Yeah.
Was that it? Was that
what year was 2021? That was the year. It was just under a year after I had Freya.
Man, I remember, I think if I'm not mistaken, I might have been commenting for ESPN or I was up in the stands, something. And I remember you hitting it and you get on the podium and I swear, like, I mean, the crowd was just so fired up and I was too, because it represents what I think the female body is just such an incredible, incredible thing. To be able to go from having a child to then being back on the podium is just like, is so incredible. But that was 2021, right? That was so
yes,
the
2021.
Snatch. Man. And now
that was also mind blowing to me. And I still don't understand how that even happened. I know Tia has done more at this point, but I thought it was insane what I did. And I don't understand how I managed to do what I did because I had a horrible birth and my recovery took forever. And I never planned on competing again. That's why it was also just such a bonus. I was willing to, if this would end my career, it would end my career. I wanted a kid, but I just used the season to kind of get mentally back again and feeling like myself again. And it was so hard to go away from Freya for the first time because she couldn't come with me. So that was, yeah. And I had not gotten my strength back. Sorry, I'm gonna get up. I was like quite far away from having my strength back, which is why that snatch was like, I don't even know what happened. That's why I was so surprised, and you could see that on the lift. I was like, what? Did I like seriously just do that?
Yeah.
I was like, what's the wrong weight on the bar?
How do you brought up something about like you got back, like how do you stay driven to compete in a sport for as long as you have? Like what keeps you engaged to do it? Because I mean, even now, you just were at the Rogue Invitational for Legends, which I missed, but are you competing again, or are you thinking about competing in Rogue or at the CrossFit Games again? Oh.
I haven't decided yet, Jason, because we're not there yet in the season, and I'm not there yet in my recovery. Like, honestly, ever since 2000 and I would like to say like since 2015, I realized 2013 when I had my back injury, you can't plan more than a year ahead. Like, it's impossible as a professional athlete. You never know what's going to happen. And I still do that now. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I think longevity is having a good team around you, is not being forced to do it or feel like it's the only thing that you can do, not feeling that this is the only thing that defines me. I am more than just it. It doesn't like fully consume me, but yet I can find the drive and passion to continue if I want to. Because I can stop if I want to, but I have the option to continue, and I can do it for one more year. I never do it. Like, I thought it was so difficult. I don't want to name a name, but I was listening to one of the young girls that was competing and doing really well in the sport. And she was like, oh, yeah, it's like so hard. I'm just going to do this for like 4 years and then I'm just done with it. I'm like, ooh, even like at my best years, there's no way I would have said I can do this for 4 more years, because mentally, you're going to do this for 4 more years. That is a long time of suffering physically and mentally. But you can do this for 1 more year. And then you can do it for 1 more year if you want to. And then you can maybe do it for 1 more year. And then here we are 15 years later. And you know what? I think I could do this for 1 more year if I wanted to.
I think what you just explained is like awesome, but I think it's so much, and I can relate to this, so much easier said than done, in that I think that what you're doing is taking the pressure off of making it seem like you need to have a decision for what's going to come, because so much can change. But I feel like a lot of people, and you know, this might be maybe even culturally more of a problem here in the US, like you're always expected to know what the next 5 years are supposed to look like in some ways. And, but I can see how specifically for something as demanding as qualifying and training for the CrossFit Games, it must be so nice to literally be able to turn off even like the mental weight of that, even if you're not training super hard. So if you were to give someone some advice to apply that to any aspect of their life, right? Like thinking about like, are you going to have another kid? Thinking about like, what's the next step in your career? Like all of those things. How do you encourage people to not overly analyze that until it's actually time to make the decision? Because there's no point in stressing about it until it's actually time to make the decision.
The thing is, I am an overanalyzer, and I am a very stressed person. Like, my cortisol has been through the roof for years. I think I also have a lot of the hormone that works really well through the stress hormone. So like I process it really well as well. I think I somehow thrive under high stress. However,
yeah, something tells me that if you've been doing this for as long as you've been doing, yeah.
But I definitely was thinking like, you need to, obviously, especially for women, you can't just let time pass you and then you're too late to have children. Like I know women don't like to talk about it, but we have an internal clock. And if you want to have a family, you don't want to wait too many years before you start trying or make a decision to do so. However, if you would have asked me, how many children do you want? I might have said I think 3 sounds really good to me, but I always followed it then with, I'm going to start with 1 and then I'm going to see, right? You don't know if you want 3 kids if you don't have a kid. Like, how on earth are you supposed to know that? So we started with 1 and then it's like, okay, you know what? This is really hard. Let's just see how things go. And like, yeah, I knew I wanted more kids, but I also knew I was far from ready to have more until like this one actually like accidentally happened. But it's okay. At that point, I was like ready to have the next one. If you ask me now, do I want another kid? I don't know yet. I I am not ready to make that decision. So I think you shouldn't try to plan too far ahead on things that you don't know. You can have ideas in your mind, and it's great to have dreams. And I've always written down goals, and I've always had something in mind. It was like, I think I want to have my kid or a first kid around 30. I don't want to wait a lot longer than that. And that's what I ended up doing. But it wasn't like written in stone, it's going to happen at this year and need to be like this or like that. Um, and that's how it was kind of with CrossFit as well. I've always had it open, like, you know what, I'll do this. And then when I'm done with this or don't want to do it anymore, I might go to med school, or I might like go and do like go to dentistry or whatever that would be. Like, I have these things in mind and it's okay to think about them. But I think it's really hard to, what people need to be careful of is trying to make decisions too far ahead, especially on things that they haven't tried and don't know yet. Because it's fun to plan, but you then also need to be willing to deviate from that plan and that being okay. And I think that's what I've also done and learned through CrossFit and competing. I like having a plan going into an event. I have like a plan going in, but in 99% of the time, that plan is gone out of the window after 1 minute into the event. And I'm
Right.
down to plan B. And then I'm down to plan C. And then I'm playing it as I go, Like, that's how life is as well. And you need to be okay with rolling with the punches and letting life be like that.
Man. Go ahead, Gabe. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm curious. Did you find it harder the transition from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 kids?
Oh, 0 to 1. 0
Really?
to 1. Because I had no idea how hard this is going to be.
Gabe, how about you, man? Gabe, you just had your
Oh
second.
man, 1 to 2. 1 to 2 was like, I don't know. We had like a really good support system from 0 to 1. I feel like we were kind of like over prepared, and everything just kind of like went easier than expected, if you can believe that. But 1 to 2 was like, oh my God, now there's 2 of them. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I do
Manny,
admit, like, workload is a lot harder with 2. But the stress of the first one was significantly higher for me. I was the person that was checking, like, feeling they fell asleep. It's like, are they still
oh
breathing?
yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
I've been
okay.
there.
Okay, she's breathing. Oh my God, it's too cold in here. I need to close the window. It's like, oh my God, it's way too warm in here. I need to open the. Oh, I'm just gonna go one more time out of bed, and I'm just gonna go like in between right now. Like, it was crazy how stressed I was.
You know, I
Now
think
it's
they
like,
make like
go find
monitors
therapy.
now that like the kids can wear that like, Annie, I want to ask you, I wasn't expecting you to bring it back to CrossFit like that, but I think that it's really interesting because when Gabe asked you the question and breaking it down to years, et cetera, like equating it to the way you looked at CrossFit games and then equating that to life and then preparation before an event, I totally get what you're saying. Like, you have a plan, but then you got to pivot the plan. Like, you got to pivot the plan. What I wanted to ask you about, my train of thought just went off the rocker there because go,
Which
oh,
never happens to him. Never at all.
well, I want to talk about business. So you start off in CrossFit, and then do you still own the gym?
Yes, I'm still one of the owners.
Yeah,
We're 3 together that I've had in. I'm not doing a lot of work at the gym though.
but the gym, if correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys had like thousands of people going through that on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's been going up again since CrossFit. No, since
COVID.
COVID. But yeah, we're doing good, and we added now in. We also have Hyrex now, like in the gym,
Oh,
so that's really fun.
Gabe and I are actually, I think you'd crush a High Rocks. Gabe and I are doing one this weekend. We're doing one in Dallas, Texas, him and I together.
Nice.
Yeah. I
It's a
wanted to,
lot of running, and I would like them to create like High Rocks Express Elite, where it would
okay.
be shorter running, heavier loads. But then Freddie's like, Annie,
That's what
you're
Jason
just making
wants.
up a CrossFit workout. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Annie, you and I want the same thing. Let's go ahead and petition for that. And
let's create something that people sign.
yeah, High Rocks with it, 2 X's. But anyways, I wanted to ask. So you have the gym. Obviously, I know you started like a sunscreen / skincare line with Katrin. That relationship has been always really cool for me to see how you guys can be competitors, but also really such great friends. But I wanted to ask, like, from an entrepreneurial perspective, where do you think that, like, I know your parents are hardworking people, but to see you like still at the top level in the sport, having a variety of different businesses and still pushing for more and wanting to balance that with like the family and whatnot, where does business play into all of that? And how are you being successful in that arena while also, trying to thrive in these other areas? It's always a good question that I like to think about is like, what mindset do you think about when it comes to the business, your family, and your fitness to keep those areas kind of moving in the right direction, especially when you're competing at the highest level? Obviously, you have your support system, but what other factors come into play there?
Well, it is pretty much me trying to allow myself to have time for other things that I'm passionate about as well, if that makes sense. So the gym has obviously always been like a great fit in for me. Jason
Jason's still on.
disappeared.
He's still on. His camera sometimes gets
Okay. There he is. But yeah, the gym has obviously always been like an obvious one there. But I've always wanted to do something more. Which is why me and Kat did a children's book. Like I've just wanted to try to give back in some way of everything that I have learned and gone throughout the years. And then it developed into like Kat was very interested in skincare. I'm very interested in just like clean products after having children. Like I think a lot about what I eat. Now I want to think a lot about what I use as well and quality of the things that I'm using.
Yep.
That's not something I'm like crazy passionate about though. And then empower is just something that fitted super well in and is something I'm actually like really, really passionate about. Like, I feel like I've just been looking for something for when I decide that I'm not going to compete anymore. Something that I enjoy doing and can be. It's really hard when you've been so passionate about something for so many years to like, what am I going to wake up and just like do something, go to school again for something I'm not like crazy passionate about. I'm very passionate about learning more. So I've done a few more courses on things, but like finding Empower and the training program for menopausal women, like there's so many more things I want. Like I just don't have the hours in the day to do these things, but I want to create postpartum training program down the lines. I want to train pregnancy. I want to create like for just women know how to train around their cycle with like the different hormonal fluctuations that we have, how to make training easier throughout the cycle. It was crazy when I started talking about some of these things to Kat just like 3 years ago. I've been doing this since 2016. But then she was like always competing in the wrong time in her cycle and had no idea on what to do like to make herself feel better. I'm like, and you're a professional athlete. That means that like girls out there don't know this stuff. So like having a platform, honestly, just like a female platform on physical and mental well-being. I want Empower to represent that down the lines in the future. And like it has been me trying to get to do some of the things I've been feeling really, really passionate about, but not haven't had time to do. And then I squeeze the time in when I'm pregnant. Every time I'm pregnant, I'm like, here we go. I have time. So then I dive in fully. So, and then Frederick, it's so cool how he just jumps on board. But it is, I think I've learned through just CrossFit, that you're going to be successful in things that you're going to be passionate about. And we're not all that fortunate. I'm not saying everyone needs to be like so passionate getting out of bed every day in the morning. I've also felt like that in CrossFit. I've had so many days out of the year, probably more than half of the days out of the year, I wake up and I'm not just like, oh my God, I cannot wait to get to the gym. Like, it's hard. It's hard work. I think knowing that life is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's never been easy. It's probably we're living at the time where it's the easiest to be alive. And yet we have so many things to complain about and stress about. I'm not diminishing anything from anyone, but I think if we manage to change the aspect and our view a little bit on expecting things to be easy, they won't be as difficult. And I think therefore finding something that I am passionate like this about has been such a gift. And it's training and working with a schedule has made it possible for me to continue doing that even after having my second kid, and also keeping my eyes open for potentially competing again next year.
I love it.
I think that's such an important differentiation, though. Like what you said about like it's not supposed to be easy, because sometimes you hear the cliche, like if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. But that's not true. Like if you love what you do, you still have to work hard for it. It's not gonna. It's just now you love what you do, and I think that differentiation is so important, because people think that if I end up doing something I'm passionate about, it's going to be easy. It's not going to require work. Like, no, it's going to require a lot of work. It's just you're going to be passionate about that work, which makes it easier than if you weren't passionate. But the fact that it's a lot of work never changes.
No, and it honestly, I don't think you can be super successful in anything or very happy then with it if it isn't challenging as well.
Yeah.
And if you don't have to put a lot of work into it. Like, I think that's the reason I've been able to be in the sport for so long, is that there's always something you can work on. There's always something you can be better at. There's something that can push you to want to continue to work hard. Even though I think a lot of people look at being a professional athlete is have stars in their eyes. Like, that's amazing. Like, that is such a fun job. Yes. And I am so lucky. I am so fortunate that I've gotten to do this for so many years. But it has not been easy. I think a lot of people look at when you have success in something with stars in their eyes that it's amazing. And please, it is amazing. And I will never say that it's not. And I would always choose to go this way again. But I don't think a lot of people would be willing to do everything that I've done throughout the years. I don't think a lot of people would want to suffer as much as I've done. And the pain that I've gone through, and I've gone through almost depression one of the years, because my body was in so much pain every single night. I was working on my knees and my back, and I didn't feel like I had time to even go and see my friends. One evening, I didn't feel like I had time to go to the store because I needed to spend that time either napping or trying to recover so that I'd be able to train the day after. It can completely consume you if you don't have a good balance for it. And like I said, I'm not saying that I'm not happy that I chose this path, but I don't think anything really comes to you easy.
Well, and if it does, I've came to a conclusion that it's so funny because everybody wants to name the thing, right? You want to be fit, you want to be this, you want to be that. But if it comes easy, it just doesn't mean as much. It's like that grind that, I know for me, people ask me, oh, what was the best year at the CrossFit Games? I won the CrossFit Games in 2008, and that was great. It was awesome. But getting back on the podium in 2013 and 14 for me meant way more, even though I took a second and third, because of the bulk of work, the effort, the journey I had to take to get there. And I think that it's hard because when you're in that journey, it's hard because you just want to get success. But later on, when you achieve that, man, that journey was all part of your perspective on the accomplishment. You know what I mean? Like you coming back and getting back on the podium. It just is so meaningful. And I think this idea that you said, and I think I totally agree. My dad said this to me a long time ago. He was like, hey, Jason, the expectation should be that life is going to be hard. And I think that if more people recognize that early on, it would help with the gratitude and the perspective. So I appreciate you sharing that. Annie, I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I see you are very busy. And I just want to say, I really appreciate always talking to you. Like, you've always been someone in the space I just thought, which just with such class and such grace and such strength. And I think you should run for, it was I think I asked you this a long time ago. So you have the mayor of Iceland, but you have a prime minister of Iceland, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's a woman, isn't she? Or am I wrong?
Well, actually, not anymore.
Okay,
She was a
sorry.
woman. She stepped down recently to go into running of becoming a president. But we actually have a female president again now.
Well, I think that you should run for female of something of your city and then eventually get to like the county or whatever and then take
You
over the
want
whole
me to
country.
do that to my family on top of everything? Should I also go into
Well,
politics?
I just think you could make a change. I mean, I think I told you that like 10 years ago. I'm like, you should be the mayor. And, but anyways, I just think that you have a really good perspective on things. I know you're very,
Thank
very
you.
busy, and we just appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. For people who want, information on like your skincare, your gym, your programming, especially, if people listening, make sure that if you have family or friends that fall into this category of like the menopausal, like we haven't talked to anybody about that. So like, I think it's such an interesting subject. And this idea that you talked about with like the cycle and the periods, like I don't even know where to start with that. Like I
Oh my
couldn't
God, there's
imagine.
so much information. It's so cool. It's like so exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, yes, it sounds exciting. Is the best place to go to your Instagram because we can link it in the podcast show notes.
Yes. So just Instagram, and there you're gonna see me post about most things. But I think also just like if women are in general interested in just like the course Women Are Not Small Men, it's a great course, and menopause course as well, then it's Dr. Stacy Sims. She is reliable, she's in the top of the field in these subjects because there's a lot of misinformation out there as well.
Wow. Women are not small men. That's great. I love it. But Annie, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate both of you for being on the podcast today. Thank you
I'm
so much.
sorry.
No,
He
how is
woke
he?
up way sooner than he was supposed to wake up. Look at my schedule. He's sick, so he's got a cold, and then he's not following my plan, man.
Hey, you know what?
On the days you're counting on a nap, the nap never goes as long.
Right?
And on the day when you have like nothing going on, they sleep for like 3 hours. It happens every time, guaranteed. Every single time.
Man. Well, Annie, and everybody listening, appreciate you guys for checking out the podcast. Appreciate you for checking out our other episodes of incredible guests, along with Gabe and I. We're always on the mic just talking about our life and what we have going on. Gabe and I have High Rocks this week. We'll make sure to keep you guys posted and keep training hard.